Okay, so very similarly to what you've heard from Emma and Nicole, is we ran a very similar kind of process of evaluating our young people's pages so that we can work out why aren't they being viewed as well, what do they want, and additional topics which they might find useful. So just to give you a bit of an overview, something that sparked this was the fact that the young people site is the least viewed area on our site, so equating to barely 1% of total views was to do with any of our young people's content. So that's kind of what sparked it originally. And historically, our site, the young people site, is a replica of the adult parent facing pages. So we're slowly going through anyway, changing it so that it relates to your health rather than your child's health, because as a young people, I remember not being liked to as compared to as a child. So that's what we're trying to affect there. So we formed a group with a partnership that we have with a group called Ready Steady Go Peer Project. So this was set up through the Ready Steady Go program, which is national as far as I'm aware, started in Southampton, and they predominantly work with young people with long-term health conditions and in schools in South Hampshire area, so mainly around New Forest, Southampton, Winchester, Fareham, just starting to broach into Portsmouth a little bit, but it is quite contained to the south coast of Solent. We did also apply for some funding for this kind of redevelopment initiative through our hospital charity, with the aim of creating to provide a framework for creating, hosting and disseminating health and wellbeing resources designed for young people. So that was our kind of remit that we had when we started. So we've had 2 sessions since we started this. First one was in the 1st of June, quite fittingly really. And the main question for it was, what do you guys think? So we very candidly said to them, we want to hear what you think, not what you think we want to hear. And we had 12 young people and 3 youth workers to help out. As mentioned earlier, we did have problems recruiting young men to our group. We didn't get any in the end, but 2 of the young people that were in our group were health ambassadors for their schools, and they said within their school environment none of the boys sign up for it, so to speak. And if you ask teenage boys, they don't tend to be so worried and concerned about their health and well-being. It is something we're trying to address, and we are broaching out to friends, children, sons, young adults, to ask for their opinion as well as when we develop new content. The main outcome was that they didn't really like the site. They thought it was messy, and the main groupings for the topics weren't ordered correctly. So it kind of gives us an idea of what to look at first. So this kind of just gives you a bit of a breakdown of some of the things that they mentioned. We went old school and did a massive post-it wall of lots of things that they didn't like. Unfortunately, we were able to do all of our sessions face-to-face, which is quite good. So like the main ones were topics not split up correctly. We did compare with our Hampshire CAM site, which is used a lot by young people on particularly their mental health content, and that's how they were comparing it. And they thought ours were quite busy, again following the same iterations that Emma said, where they don't like the colour scheme. It's very dark and very blocky. And something I found really interesting was when you're talking about videos, Emma, our group actually liked our videos, apart from one which was talking about smoking, and I'm just going to highlight it, was that it was an old man talking about smoking rather than a young person. So that's a complete oversight on our part. Another thing I found really interesting, and I ended up discussing it in the second session, was our thumbnails. So on the Healthier Together sites, we use thumbnails as our buttons rather than links. And they felt really strongly about how they should look. Okay, so just in our first session, we gave them 2 case studies. So one was a young lady who was very shy, querying teenage pregnancy, and the other one was to do with a young boy who was in a gang. And we said to them, go to the pages that you would think you'd go to. So they did that, and then we asked them to grade how well they navigated the site, how well they got around it. And again, what's shown there, you can't really see it particularly well, but the highest score was 3 and the lowest score was 5. So 0 being the best, 5 being the worst. So that just kind of gives you a bit of a reflection on what they were thinking. Maybe I asked them to be too candid at the start, but it's easier to go around with that. So our second session was all about design. So we looked at the feel of the site, the aesthetics, how they wanted it to look. And we did also touch a little bit about content. So one of the things that we've said as part of the group is that they'd end up learning how to create a web page. They'd learn about how content should look, what kind of premise should be within there. So our second session, I covered a bit about this. So our first heading, so to speak, was page design. So I said to them, create the page. What would be your ideal page that you would see information? I did manage to create 2 blank pages for them that are hidden within the site, so they could have a bit of a play, and they really enjoyed that and learning about what needs to be considered. So headings, layout, accessibility, and areas like that. So some did like the drawing. To be fair, I still will draw things out with pen and paper. But what I found really interesting is that they wanted all of the areas to be able to be viewed at once rather than scrolling through a page. So the one here, which is being done in felt tips, they really thought, like, I want to be able to see all the information that I need to know on like a phone screen. So that's something that we're going to consider when we're creating the pages, is what will it look like mobile? Because young people don't necessarily use their laptops, they use their phones, as said before, Instagram and TikTok. So looking at ways that we can do that as well. And then we looked at the headings, so where we hadn't grouped the topics particularly well in their opinion. I went and had a bit of a look around, asked a few friends who work within web design, and they said the optimum amount of main headings within an area is 3. We currently had 8, so I didn't want to kind of try and get that all down to 3, so we went with 5. It's a nice balance. It looks quite nice in a taskbar at the top of a page, and this is what they ended up coming with. So they did all of this themselves. I was there along with our mental health lead, Dr. Natalie Roberts, who helped question why they were putting something in an area. So the headings that they came up with were lifestyle, extra info, emergency, staying healthy, and mental health. So what I found quite interesting from the start is so we looked at how these would be all put into place. So I created these little tabs that had all the current titles of our pages that we had, and said, these are the areas that they're in. They don't need to stay in them. Come and think about how you did it. And it was a really interesting session, and thinking things more laterally rather than that's that topic that needs to go there. It was really quite insightful. So these are just like the overlays of what we did. And what we also said is that if there are any topics that weren't on there that you guys thought should be on there, please write them on. So we had things like domestic abuse, cohesive relationships, cyberbullying. They were really keen on having much more detail on things like contraception and periods and puberty. So that's something that we're going to be developing on. And again, the mental health section kind of linked. And a big one that kind of crossed a lot of the kind of headings was things like gangs, because that's quite a big area problem in around Southampton. Was a lot of cross-county, if I'm saying it right, cross-county gangs that operate. So yeah, that was quite insightful. And then the second part, which was the nice kind of fun bit to do at the end, where we looked at thumbnails. So they didn't like the fact it was an image. They rather have something drawn or a cartoon or something like that would make them laugh if they were looking at it. They wanted it to be a positive experience, not I'm feeling really low and going to the anxiety page and it being quite a dark tab. So again, I gave them lots of different headings, and I said that come up with whatever you want. I'd logged into Canva, I'd taken loads of felt tip pens. I said, go crazy. They all chose the tech rather than the pens. So these are just some ideas of what they came up with. They are a bit abstract, but I do quite like them. So this would be like a social media page. That would be for periods, LGBTQ plus, smoking, which again is a big topic at the moment across the country, as well as in Hampshire. So they've said combine smoking and vaping, put them in the same category because they're covering the same areas. Contraception. This was a friendships one. I did have to ask them. I thought it was a little bit too abstract. But when they told me it, I thought, oh, that makes a lot of sense now. And then this one was done by someone who was drawing on their own iPad, and they did like a healthy eating tips, which I really enjoyed. And it was interesting that none of them went for photos. They went for literally grabbing elements, drawing them on to give it that personal touch. So just kind of an idea of what we're looking at in the next steps. So we're next meeting in half term, obviously because they're at schools. Our age groups were 16 to 18. Again, it's probably an interest point of view. But we also did ask at the start when GCSEs were going on, we were recruiting, so that's probably a bit of a missed time on my account. But we're going to be highlighting on like actual content. So what information do they want to have on the page? So we're going to be doing some pages beforehand that people can look at and really pick apart. Looking at images and videos, we do have one of our members in the group is trying to think of the right term here. She likes creating animation videos. So she's going to go away and have a look and see if she can do something for one of the topics. And also looking at what other resources they would like to see. So that link section, because one of the things that they said at the start was that they didn't like how it was an immediate link out to another site. They quite liked a little landing page or embedding it in. So that's something that we're going to be looking at as well. So that's everything in terms of what we've been doing in Wessex and what we hope to achieve soon.
Ollie, thank you for that